Hello everyone. Now you will hear a brief retelling of the movie Heidi. Enjoy watching. In the second half of the 19th century, Heidi, a young orphan, was raised by her Aunt Dita. However, it seems that taking care of the child became too burdensome for her, so she decided to take her niece to her grandfather in the Alps. There were many rumors about the man. Apparently, he had become so wild that he even forgot how to speak. Surely he wouldn't be happy about another mouth to feed. The girl felt hot, so she took off her dress to run around with the animals. Wearing just her undershirt, Heidi appeared before her grandfather, who was busy chopping wood. Data explained that she had found a job in the city and couldn't take the girl with her. "Take her with you," grumbled the grandfather. But the woman left the girl by the house, promising that the old man wouldn't do anything bad to her. Heidi now didn't know what to do. She realized that no one wanted her. Her grandfather locked himself in the house, leaving his granddaughter outside. Having no choice, Heidi went to the barn with her belongings and spent the night there next to a goat. In the morning, her grandfather silently entered the barn, milked a goat, and gave her some milk to drink. He planned to take the girl to the pastor to figure out what to do with her. The pastor examined Heidi, checked her teeth, and concluded that the child was strong and healthy, so she wouldn't be a problem. But her grandfather still didn't want to keep Heidi with him. Perhaps some other farmer might take an interest in her. However, the pastor wouldn't be heading to the city for another 3 days, so she would have to stay with her grandfather temporarily. For now, he let her stay in the house, though there was only one chair and one bed inside. Heidi didn't mind. She was happy even with a hayloft. The next morning started with fresh milk and an introduction to a young shepherd named Peter. That day they herded goats together. The boy grew up without a father. Heidi told him she liked it here much better than in the village, where she spent all her days indoors with her aunt. While the girl ran around the meadow, Peter secretly took bites of the sausage and cheese her grandfather had packed for her. He then blamed the goat for it. 2 goats got into a fight, and Peter began to hit them. Heidi suggested she'd share half of her food with him if he promised not to hit the goats anymore. Later, Peter told Heidi that, according to rumors, her grandfather had killed someone. Heidi decided it would be safer to sleep in the barn. Her grandfather figured out that Peter had been spreading rumors about him. These were all lies, and Heidi shouldn't believe them. The girl hugged her grandfather and ran back to her loft. The next day, her grandfather brought out some woodworking tools and started making something. Heidi told Peter that her grandfather planned to take her to the pastor tomorrow. But when she returned, she saw a second chair her grandfather had made for her. The happy girl realized she could stay and continue enjoying time with Peter. However, summer ended, and Peter wouldn't be herding goats again until the following spring. He would be going to school instead. Heidi and her grandfather visited the village, where people looked at him with fear and disapproval. They met the pastor again, who insisted that Heidi must go to school and learn to read. Heidi wanted this too, but her grandfather had his own views on life. The child grew restless, wishing spring would come soon so Peter would return. To cheer her up, her grandfather took her sledding and brought her to Peter's house. The boy was still at school, so Heidi met his mother and blind grandmother. Eventually, Peter came home. The family lived in poverty, eating boiled potatoes and stale bread instead of cheese and sausage. Spring arrived, and unexpectedly, Data returned to the village. She came to Heidi's grandfather saying she had found a place for Heidi in a wealthy family's home. She would go to school with their daughter. This time, however, her grandfather didn't want to let her go. Data argued that if the old man wouldn't let the girl attend school, the villagers might take Heidi away from him by force. She found Heidi and told her she could live in a big, beautiful house. Wealthy parents were looking for a companion for their daughter, but Heidi wanted to stay. Then Data lied, saying that her grandfather also wanted the girl to leave with her. The woman didn't even let her say goodbye to Peter. The old man realized he had been deceived. He tried to stop his niece, but she had already left the village. City folks laughed at the old man from the Alps, and he could barely hold back his tears. Heidi looked sadly at the alpine mountains she had grown to love. Soon, the girl found herself in noisy Frankfurt. Data brought her to the Sesaman Mansion, an enormous building bustling with servants. First, Heidi met the governess. The strict woman thought the girl was too small, and even her name seemed unchristian. But Data assured her that Heidi was exactly what the master wanted, a pure, unspoiled girl from the countryside. Data was eager to collect her payment, having essentially sold her niece. Heidi met a girl named Clara, who couldn't walk and was confined to a wheelchair. Heidi pushed Clara around the room and accidentally broke a vase. The blonde girl lied, saying it was her fault. During dinner, Heidi started slurping soup directly from the bowl. She didn't know how to use cutlery. She even hid one of the rolls in her pocket. The governess began teaching Heidi with a tutor and explained the schedule she would now follow. But Heidi, already sleepy, didn't hear a word. The next morning, a servant scrubbed Heidi with a stiff brush during her bath and dressed her in a fancy outfit. Clara helped Heidi get used to things, including how to use cutlery. But reading was a real struggle. Heidi didn't even know the alphabet. This outraged the teacher and the governess. "How could such a wild, uneducated creature end up in our house?" the woman fumed. She decided to ask Mr. Sesemann to send the girl back to the mountains. Clara asked Heidi to bring her to the room with her mother's portrait. In the painting, they were together, and Clara was depicted standing. Clara explained that she fell ill after her mother passed away. Her father was always away on business, leaving her stuck in this house forever. During nap time, Heidi asked the servant Sebastian to open the window. She was hoping to see the mountains, but they were too far away. Restless, Heidi decided to take Clara for a ride through the city streets and even climb a tower in hopes of seeing her beloved mountains. She left Clara in the middle of the market square. The governess discovered that both the young lady and her new friend were missing. Even after climbing the tower, Heidi couldn't see the mountains and grew even more homesick for her grandfather. Meanwhile, Clara bought a kitten for a couple of pennies but couldn't resist and bought all the kittens. Sebastian finally found the girls and brought them back to the mansion. The governess scolded them, but then she started sneezing uncontrollably. It turned out she was allergic to cats. Panicked, she demanded the kittens be removed. Sebastian promised to take care of them. As punishment, the governess left Heidi without dinner and made her stand in the corner. Next time, she threatened to lock her in a closet with rats. Heidi managed to collect a whole bag of rolls. She dressed up and was about to leave the house, but the governess stopped her. Data had lied to the girl, saying she could return to the mountains anytime she wanted. Heidi explained that she had been collecting rolls for her toothless grandmother, who couldn't chew stale bread. Clara cried, realizing she had no other friends. The girl refused to leave her room and felt unwell. Heidi came to her upset friend and said, "I only have you." She added that they could have a wonderful time together. Studying was still hard for Heidi. She couldn't memorize the letters. All the servants lined up in a row when Mr. Sesemann arrived home with his mother. The older woman had a much kinder nature than the governess and asked Heidi to call her grandmother. Clara's father noticed that his daughter had become more cheerful with her new friend. However, the governess claimed Heidi was out of her mind, disrupting Clara's studies with her wild behavior. Grandmother refused to believe her. The countess decided to personally observe the behavior of the mountain girl. She played a clever trick by stopping halfway through a bedtime story for Heidi and suggesting that she could finish it herself, if only she knew how to read. If Heidi learned to read, she would be able to find out how the story ended on her own. The countess told her son that Heidi was a sweet girl and would learn to read if motivated, but life in the mansion was not suitable for her. However, Mr. Sesemann dismissed her concerns, saying that the most important thing was Clara's happiness. One night, when a maid was sneaking some of the household's wine, she heard strange, frightening noises. Along with the governess, they concluded it must be a ghost. Sebastian discovered that the front door had been left open, leading the household staff to believe that something supernatural was at play. Heidi, to everyone's joy, quickly learned to read, which pleased her teacher and the Sesemann family. Clara's father promised his daughter that Heidi would stay with them forever. However, that night, Heidi burst into tears upon hearing this news. Soon after, the grandmother left the mansion, and the governess resumed her role as the main caretaker. One night, Mr. Sesemann and the doctor heard strange noises. Armed with pistols, they prepared to confront the unwelcome ghost, only to discover it was Heidi. The girl had been sleepwalking, wandering into the courtyard to gaze into the distance, likely in the direction of the mountains. Mr. Sussman found yet another pile of rolls Heidi had collected. When she woke up, she tearfully explained that she had been dreaming about her grandfather. The doctor realized that Heidi was deeply homesick and suffering from depression. The next day, Mr. Sussman had to explain the situation to Clara, who protested, saying she was also ill and lonely. In anger, Clara yelled at her friend, telling her to leave that very day. Heidi was to be taken back to her grandfather. She tried to speak with Clara, but the sad girl refused to open her door. The household prepared a basket full of rolls for Heidi. Before leaving, she asked Sebastian to give Clara an eagle figurine that her grandfather had carved for her. Sebastian took Heidi back to her native village. The locals marveled at her fine wardrobe. Peter immediately ran up to his friend. Finally, Heidi was able to give the rolls to her toothless grandmother, who could now enjoy soft bread. Peter, in turn, received a gift of sausages. The Alp grandfather heard his beloved granddaughter calling him and ran to meet her. The old man was incredibly happy about her return, just as Heidi was thrilled to be back to her familiar life in the mountains. She drank milk, herded goats, ate simple food, and went for walks with Peter. Heidi wrote letters to Clara. In the winter, she and her grandfather moved to the village so that she could attend school. The pastor was much stricter than Clara's teacher. When asked what they wanted to be when they grew up, the students replied shepherd, blacksmith, or farmer. Heidi, however, said she wanted to write fairy tales, which made the children laugh. Heidi tutored Peter after school, but learning was difficult for him. She missed her friend very much. Clara, in turn, regretted not saying goodbye to Heidi. Clara's grandmother made the incredible decision to bring her granddaughter to visit the mountain girl. The once reclusive Alp grandfather poured the esteemed guests some homemade schnapps and agreed to let Clara stay with them for a few days. Heidi introduced her friend to the goats and Peter, who was too shy to approach at first. Peter also felt jealous as Heidi no longer accompanied him to the pastures. Now Heidi was teaching Clara proper table manners for life in the countryside. Out of spite, Peter decided to cause trouble by pushing Clara's wheelchair down a cliff, where it shattered into pieces. Clara was upset, realizing she would now have to sit in one place all day. The Alp grandfather figured out it was Peter's doing. He carried Clara on his shoulders straight to the pasture. "Your foolishness is your punishment," he told Peter. The old man ordered him to look after the girls and left. Still sulking, Peter sat nearby while Heidi went to gather berries. Clara was left alone when a butterfly landed on her leg and then flew away. Without realizing it, she stood up and almost followed it. With the support of Heidi and Peter, she managed to take a few steps. The next day, she succeeded in walking on her own. Mr. Sussman arrived in the mountains to fetch his daughter and was furious. Clara's grandmother had brought her here without his permission. However, he was left speechless when he saw his daughter walking toward him unassisted. It was simply unbelievable. Clara's grandmother gave Heidi a gift, a blank book for her to fill with her own stories. It didn't matter that the local children laughed at her dream of writing fairy tales. They had never seen anything beyond their village, while she had experienced another world. If something brings joy, then it's worth pursuing. The friends said goodbye, and Clara returned to the city. Heidi went back to her goats, Peter, and her familiar life in the Alps, a life of freedom. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new uploads.